Ryan Glover. I'm outside of the Capitol building, and I can't help but think about, January 6th, 2021, one of the most infamous days in American history. And I was actually incarcerated already because I would have probably been at the Capitol that day if I hadn't been. I was locked up in Middlesex for a false domestic violence charge. My wife has said I pushed her while I was living in Cambridge. After I had caught her texting another man, and I ended up spending about 5-6 months in Middlesex County in Massachusetts. The first 4 months were pretty easy. They put me in a veteran unit. I didn't go to the veteran unit right away. At first, I was in a cell. I had a cell. My cellmate was from Africa. He was cool. We would play chess. Then I went to the medical unit, and I was living with a guy. But I think he possibly could have been a pedophile. Not judging him. Probably hiding out from dealing with people. They tried to put me in this unit with people who assaulted police officers, but the guy didn't want to move his stuff off of the bunk. So I went back to the medical unit. They weren't trying to let me into the veteran unit. Eventually they did let me into the veteran unit. It was pretty easy from there. And in the veteran unit, they would give access to the internet, kind of you couldn't be on the internet, but we watch YouTube videos, we watch movies. People shared their commissary. It was just a lot cooler, and everyone is served, so anybody who was a veteran could be in that unit. And then they mixed it with these kids and the veteran unit, people who were role model prisoners. A lot of people who I got to meet. I was this Muslim kid I met, and he actually had a murder charge. He had murdered someone, I think he was selling marijuana, and the guy basically tried to short him, and he ended up shooting him, which was a sad. His name was Yahya Massassori. It was this cool dude named Ruslan Altador, who was accused of murder, awaiting trial. And one of the things and stuff and everything I noticed, particularly this was during COVID, and they wouldn't give you court dates. They would move your court dates, push them back. And a lot of people have been in, they're just waiting for trial. Cause one of the things they do in the criminal justice system is they don't just give you your trial date right away. They make excuses of they're preparing evidence, say they have witnesses. I had a very simplistic case, but because I was black, and I think this happens to a lot of people, they push back the date, and they held me dangerous because I have some other criminal charges, nothing ever that was serious in my opinion. But yeah, they kept me there for 120 days. And then instead of just letting me go because they knew they didn't have a case, they let me out on an ankle bracelet. I didn't have any identification, and I was in Massachusetts. That's not where I'm from originally. So I didn't have any resources. I had about at the time about $10,000 in the bank. I wanted to get my money from the bank. The rule was I wasn't supposed to contact my wife. I've been reaching out to my lawyer. I reached out to the judge and stuff about contacting her so I could get my wallet. And I ended up meeting up with her. I set off the ankle bracelet. I ended up getting arrested in Fall River, going back to Middlesex, and I did another month. I say all this to say I don't think the criminal justice system is fair. I don't think it that is keep in mind that none of this was true. I never pushed her. I simply just walked away from her, and she made the allegation and stuff and everything that I pushed her so she could try to steal money out of my account, which she did. I mean, you could say some of the money was rightfully hers. Yeah. And I tried and stuff to do better, forgive. I went to Pennsylvania, and that was the most egregious because I got lied on there. Like when I got into an argument and I was about to leave, and she said I held a gun to her head, forced her to perform oral sex on me, which was a complete lie. And I think the prosecutor knew it was a lie because there was no evidence. Obviously, you can test people. There's saliva tests to see if someone has done that. She did this out of malicious, because I was talking to another woman, my ex-girlfriend from college. I was planning on going to see her, this was right before my birthday, and I divorced my wife. And what ended up happening, stuff, everything, I ended up going to jail for 11 months. So, people definitely go to jail for things they didn't do, and I experienced that, and, it's definitely hard to fight for your freedom. And I say all this to say, just because somebody gets charged with something doesn't mean that they did it, because, there's a lot of reasons, why people lie and make up false allegations. It could be because they're upset. It could be because, they want to see that person suffer. And I feel that the criminal justice system and stuff just cares about convictions. They just care about the title, or advancing their career at the expense of your own life. And you never really know until you're fighting for your life. And that second time I was in jail in Pennsylvania, which was at first a difficult time. I was really fighting for my life, because it's I was facing decades in prison. I think the prosecutor wanted to give me 10 years, and he knew that the charges were false. And York County has one of the corrupt prosecutors. This is a rat. There are so many rats in DC. Oh my goodness. But yeah, I think that back to January 6th, a lot of those people, if we lived in a just country, they should be freed. I think that people take this country very seriously, and get passionate, especially in elections, and that we need to start having grace and mercy, regardless of the fact that people got carried away, and wrapped up in as far as the political rhetoric. I don't think Donald Trump should win the next election. I think there's a possibility that he does, and I don't know if that'll be good for the country at this point in human history. I think it's a very real possibility that it could be one of the worst things to ever happen to America. We've seen that there's already been 2 assassination attempts on his life, and just as far as the fervor that he inspires, Vice President Harris, I think she's awesome. As far as her character, her integrity, her competence. I don't doubt her ability to lead, but also I don't know if she necessarily stands for Americans. I don't think Donald Trump does either. And that's the problem with politics, is a lot of these people, they're not really for average people. They're not going to really do anything to change the criminal justice system, so things that aren't fair that happen, especially when people are lying or making up false allegations against people, what's going to stop that from happening in the future? And I know there's going to be a lot of negative comments, because there's always negative comments with any video I do, and I think that's something and stuff, everything that should change. I think it would be nice to see people who are more respectful on social media, but yeah, it's just because I wish for it doesn't mean it'll happen. I think that we live in a time, obviously this is divisive, but people should stop taking politics so seriously. I think maybe doing the work in their community to make the country the place you want to see it, and not demonizing any particular group. Start working with groups, whether it's immigrants who are coming here, or the LGBTQ community, or whether it's MAGA, or liberals. I think if we all work together, we can make this the country that we really want to see. And I really believe that. And at the end of the day, it always starts at your local elections. It doesn't matter who's really president. So just a figurehead.